Good morning, everyone. We're going to be talking today about in search of transportation funding, and we're going to try to educate the public as to what the Missouri Department of Transportation's needs are and where they're spending their money and why it's important that we take a look at increasing our transportation funding so that we can make our roads much better. And also, it's probably the key economic development thing that we can do in our state, because without good roads, you know, we're kind of like the gateway to Missouri here, the gateway to the west, the gateway to the east. We are the central hub for most of the roads that are traveling through the United States. So we have the most number of roads, as you'll see in our presentation, and so we want to go through this presentation and give you an idea of why it's important to have this funding. So we've had meetings throughout the state. We've had 8 meetings so far. We have some other locations that want us to come back, and as you can see, future meetings that are scheduled, these people want us to either come back, or they have contacted us and want to hear what our presentation is. And so we want to make sure that we get this exposed to as many people in the state as we can, and let them know what this situation is and how critical it's becoming. The information that you'll see will be coming from the Missouri Department of Transportation. It comes from their information that they have in some of their presentations and some of their pamphlets, and so we're not creating anything new. We're just creating what they have, and we want to show you and try to explain it in a little more detail so that it's easier to understand. A lot of you may not be aware that we have the 7th largest highway system in the United States. We have right now 34,000 miles of interstate highway. We have about 140,000 miles of other types of roads within our state. So we have a very large road system. We're the 12th in highway performance and cost effectiveness. What that tells me is that MoDOT, even though they're low in their funding, excuse me, does a great job in maintaining our roads, and the amount of money that they spend, they're doing a really good job with spending that money. The problem is that because we have so many roads, and because over the years the amount of cost that is taken to maintain those roads is becoming more and more costly, so we have to figure out a way to generate some funds. So we're going to provide you a lot of different ways that funding can be accessed, and other ways that we can do that. We're also going to cover some things that's already been proposed, and the reason for that. We're the 47th in revenue per mile. Again, that tells me that the amount of money that they have and the amount of money that they're spending it in a very cost-effective way. So here's what the buckets look like. As you can see, the red buckets are money that comes from mostly user fees, and this money is user fees being your title fees, your registration fees, your driver's license fees. Those types of fees are called user fees. MoDOT gets about 2/3 of their money from this. We get about $911 million from the federal government, and that's just passed down. Now, in order for us to get that money, we have to match those dollars. So we have to have an 80-20% match. So if we don't have that match, we won't get that much money. So we have $911 million coming from the federal government. We have $1.5 billion, which is generated from user fees within our state. And of course, these are fees that are, as I said earlier, are fees that are required by motor vehicle people that own motor vehicles. There's about 4.3 million motor vehicle owners in our state, and so this money is generated from that. The bottom three, as you can see, these bottom 3 buckets, they are $408 million of the $1.5 billion goes to our cities and counties. They get $138 million of that comes from our federal dollars. $270 million of that comes from our user fees. So that money is, when those user fees come in, that money is then distributed to our cities and counties so they can help maintain their roads within their cities and counties. Then we have other state agencies. $250 million of that $1.5 billion goes to other state agencies. Most of that goes to our Missouri State Highway Patrol. So that's to help for them to buy their vehicles, maintain their systems, their offices, and also pay payroll. Then we have a $280 million debt payment. Now that debt payment was created back in 2010 by a bond that was purchased to help with our funding within our state roads. So we have to pay that back. Unfortunately, that won't be paid back until 2033. And they did spend all that money on our infrastructure, and that money has now been spent. So if you'll look at those three buckets, you'll notice that there's about $1 billion there that's already spent that doesn't even go to our roads. So out of that 1.5 billion, 1 billion of that doesn't even is not even spent on our roads. So that's an important part to remember as we go through this presentation. Then we have in the other bucket over here, we have 1.4 billion. 911 million of that is almost 911 million, less the federal money that goes to cities and counties, goes to our roads and bridges. The other $725 million is distributed to is state funding through the user fees. So that money is spent on our roads and bridges, and then we have $96 million goes to multimodal. And for those of you that don't know what that means that goes to our ports along our riverways. It goes to our airports, those types of things that we have to use and spend money on to help our infrastructure within the state. We're also spending $18 million in general revenue. That just started just a few years ago because we weren't getting enough money to spend on our ports, our riverways, and for our transportation, whether it be railway, airports, or whatever. So we started tapping into general revenue, and I think that's a huge mistake. We don't want to continue to tap into general revenue. We already have enough problems there as it is. This kind of breaks down how it's spent. You know, we already discussed the three buckets originally that don't even go to our roads and bridges. Out of that 1.4 billion, there's 1.38 million of that goes to our construction programs, which are $808 million. Now that's doing our bypasses, our special intersections. As you know, we've been doing a lot of these crisscross intersections to help cut down on accidents. Those have done a great job in creating better safety. We also have the roundabouts. As you all have traveled through the state, I'm sure you've passed and crossed a roundabout. That also helps those intersections as far as speeding up the traffic flow. So some of that $800 million goes there. MoDOT needs $430 million to pay for their maintenance. Now that includes the maintenance on their buildings, maintenance on their vehicles. They have a lot of vehicles, as you probably can expect to have in an operation of this size. So they spend $430 million in maintenance. They also spend $79 million in their fleets. So that means they have to replace those vehicles. They're spending that at the rate of $79 million. Some of their vehicles aren't cheap. When you look at some of the size of their trucks, they're paying a pretty good price for that. And then we have admin costs. So that's the people in administration. We spend $52 million in administration, and then we spend $19 million in highway safety programs. Now that is something that you might notice as you're going down the road and you see the digital signs along the roads telling you to drive slow or don't drink and drive. Those types of things are a safety program. So we spend some money in those to help motorists be alert that, hey, be careful as you drive, be sure and watch what's happening so you don't have accidents. And then in our multimodal, which is our aviation, our transit, which is our train systems, our rail systems, and waterways is $6 million. All that money is then spent in multimodal. If we want to increase our economic development here, we need to concentrate a little more, in my opinion, on multimodal, because that is an important part of our economic development here. Now, to give you an idea of what's happened in the past, the last time the state fuel tax was raised was in 1996. That's been 21 years ago. We raised that tax to 17 cents at its current rate. Today, its buying power is only 8 cents. What that means is that the cost of oil, the cost of gravel, the cost of equipments, all of that stuff, cost of labor, all of that stuff has increased, and we're only getting half of what we're getting from our fuel tax in buying power. So because of 1996, and we haven't raised it then, we went backwards. So MoDOT has done a great job, I think. You know, they've shut down some facilities. They've laid people off, trying to stay within their budget so that they can still maintain our roads. And so they've lost their buying power since 1996 on fuel. Motor vehicle registrations, your driver's license, your titles, those types of things, registrations on your vehicles, all of those user fees, which are called user fees, they haven't been raised since 1984. Some of those haven't been raised since 1996. So you're looking at 69, excuse me. So you're looking at 30 years, over 40 years that we haven't increased any more funding to MoDOT. So if you'll remember, in the red buckets, that's where that money comes from. The red buckets haven't been increased since 84 and 96. So it's obvious to see where MoDOT is struggling when it comes to their funding. Our federal programs, that $911 million, which was in the blue bucket in the original presentation, and we covered, that is good until 2020. So we have a contract, and we've been able to match that with the federal government. It's an 80-20 match. That's good until 2020. We don't know what will happen. A lot of that will depend on whether or not we can match that funding or not. If we can't match that funding, we won't get that $911 million again. So in 2020 or 2021, we'll know at that point how much federal dollars that we'll be able to get down from the federal government. Here is a graph that gives you an idea of what our road condition is currently. The checkered numbers, the interstate and major highways. These up here will show you that about 77% of our roadway is in our interstate and major highways. They're in about 90% overall good condition currently. Now you'll be traveling down the highway and you'll say, hey, this looks pretty good. It's got new asphalt on it. But understand one thing. MoDOT is only putting 1.5 inches of cap of asphalt on that road. They're trying to do that to keep the base from deteriorating. That will not last very many years, that they'll have to go back in and do that again. Their hopes is that the base will not deteriorate, and that when we do get some funding, they'll be able to go in and improve those roads. Again, in the minor roads, and you can see what that is, there's 81% of the roads that we have in our minor roads today. That's 21% of our traveled roads that we have out on our highways. And then we have, and they're in 81% good condition. Then we have what's considered our low volume roads. These are what you would think of as our numbered and lettered roads, our farm to market roads. They take in about 73%. They're in about 73% in good condition. They take in 2% of our traffic. So about 400 vehicles per day travel on these roads. What's happening right now, because MoDOT doesn't have funding, those roads are not being addressed. So they're doing the mowing along the roads. They're doing those types of things. They're patching the chug holes, the potholes, and stuff like that. They're not doing any major construction because they don't have the funding for that. They are an important part of our economic structure in our state because there are farm to market roads. So our farmers travel those roads to get to our major interstates so they can transport their goods. So we did a survey, and about 7.5 out of 10 people think that MoDOT's doing a great job. And I think they are. I think based on the amount of funding that they have, they're doing a wonderful job. We need to figure out a way so that we can give them more funding, because one of these days the deterioration on the roads are going to be to the point where we can't fix them. Each Missouri driver pays about $30, and that's in your user fees. In other words, when you buy your driver's license and those types of things throughout the year, you're paying on an average of about $30 per year to go into the user fee fund so that they can go in toward the maintenance of our roads. Again, $1 billion of that $1.5 billion doesn't even hit the roads. So that user fee money goes to help pay for highway patrol, helps pay for the debt that they have had from the bond, also goes to our cities and counties. And that's far less than what we would spend for a cell phone or internet or cable TV, you know. So it's important to put that into perspective. Do we want to have good roads, or would we have good cable TV? I don't know what the solution is, but I do know for our state to advance and to get do better, we need some good roads to make our economic development in a good position as we move forward. So how do we compare with other states? A lot of people ask me that. How do we compare to states around us? And if you'll notice that we have our gasoline and our diesel price on gas tax is 17 cents. The closest state to us is Oklahoma. They have 17 cents for gasoline, 14 cents for diesel. Arkansas is 21.5 cents for gas and 22.5 cents, where we're 17 on each one of those. If you'll look and see where Kentucky is, they pay 30.9 cents a gallon on gasoline, 27.9 cents on diesel. So all of these states around us are paying more on their gas and diesel tax. Also, if you look up there how many bridges, and it's up on the upper right-hand corner, we maintain 10,000 bridges, which is far more than any other state around us. So we have not only our roads to maintain, but we have all these bridges. Now, MoDOT's done a great job because it's convenient. You know, right now you can go down the interstates and you can get off just about wherever you want to. That's important for our consumers. Our people that traveling our roads within our state want to have that accessibility. MoDOT's done a great job doing that. Unfortunately, we have 10,000 bridges. Every time they have an exit, we have a bridge. So that's why I wanted to show that to you, because bridge maintenance is also a big part of our economic development because it costs dollars. So what does MoDOT feel they'll need to move us forward? They need about $825 more million in order to move us forward into the future. Now, is that all they're going to need? I doubt very much. As costs go up and everything, we'll need more funding. But currently, Missouri Department of Transportation says $825 million will get us started in the right direction. How will they spend that? They'll spend $170 million of that to improve our roads and our bridges. You know, we have about 2,500 to 3,000 bridges that they say need to be replaced. That money will go to help do that. They want to spend $279 million to increase our economic development and improve safety. So how that works is, some people say, well, how does improved safety help your economic development? It helps that because we have less accidents, you save money on your insurance, keeps the insurance prices down. Those types of things has a big impact on our economic development. So it costs less money for the consumer. We need to spend about $300 million to improve our reconstruction of our major interstates. You know, right now they say to do I-70 alone, and I-70 is starting to deteriorate faster than they can keep it up. They say it's going to take about $2 billion to do that all the way across the state. So $300 million will be a start to get that started so we can start to improve that. There's areas that they can go ahead and work on, bring those back up that are really deteriorating, give them time to get back to the areas that are not so bad so that they can improve those. And then they want to spend $80 million on our multimodal transportation projects. To me, that's a very important part in our economic development, particularly in areas where we have our waterways. We're not capitalizing on our ports running along the Mississippi River. There's a lot of equipment, a lot of merchandise that can be sent down the river, and so we need to improve those ports so that we can transport stuff from our businesses to the ports along the riverways so they can get those out to other parts of the country. So what are some of our funding options that we want to cover? So we're looking at 8 funding options. Some of these that you all are probably already familiar with. Some of these you've heard a lot about. Can you get back to that? So we have our motor fuel tax increase. So what does that mean? You know, we were talking about we're 17 cents a gallon. So what can we do to increase revenue for MoDOT? We can increase our gasoline tax. If we increased our gas tax by 10 cents a gallon, that would generate MoDOT roughly $450 million in additional revenue, increasing our gas tax to 10 cents a gallon. Consumer Price Index, what does that mean? Consumer Price Index, or CPI, is indexing. So what if we just went and indexed our user fees to cost of living? So as the cost raised, we also raised our user fees at that same cost of living. So right now, that figure is about 2.2%. So the way we calculated that was we went back 15 years, took that average. Cost of living index for the last 15 years is 2.2%. So do we want to do that? We'll show you later on in the presentation what that impact that will have. Then we have just raising our motor vehicle licensing fees or registration fees a flat rate. You know, sometimes we might want to raise those $10. We might want to raise them $30. So what that would mean is if you're paying $20 for a driver's license and we raise that $20, you'd pay $40 for that driver's license. So we want to show you in this presentation how much impact that would have on money for MoDOT. Then we've already, the taxpayers have already answered the general sales tax increase. They voted that down. That's another proposal. Do we want to bring that out and present that to the public again? And we'll show you how much money that and how big of an effect that will have on generating revenue for Missouri Department of Transportation. Then we have a motor vehicle sales tax increase. And what that motor vehicle sales tax increase is, right now you pay a sales tax when you buy a new vehicle. We're looking at raising that 1%. So if it's 4.225%, we raise that to 5.225%. We want to show you the impact that that would have in generating money for Missouri Department of Transportation. And then we talked about transferring the low volume roads to our cities and counties. We'll get into that discussion as we go on. That's probably the most unpopular one. There's about 11,000 miles of roads, and these are your low volume roads, your farm to market roads. Do we want to transfer those to our cities and counties, let them maintain them? Quite honestly, they can maintain them cheaper, but they can't maintain them without some revenue. So we'd have to look at see how we can give that revenue to them, and so we'll discuss that in the presentation. And then we talked about toll roads, and there's a lot of opposition to toll roads. I don't think that tolling will work in the conventional way within our state. The reason for that is that MoDOT has done such a good job in putting exits everywhere. So if you do tolling, you're going to have to shut off some of those exits. I don't think we want to shut off the exits because we like the convenience. So we're going to present a new concept of tolling, and that tolling is only at the entrances to our state. And of course we can't do tolling unless we pass a bill to give the Missouri Department of Transportation authorization to go to the federal government. The federal government then has to approve whether or not they would approve that type of tolling. But that type of tolling wouldn't affect in-state commerce. It would just capture those people that are traveling through our state that don't pay for our roads and bridges, but yet utilize those. And then we have the open container law, and it's a small amount of money, and we'll discuss that as we get to it. But right now, our open container law doesn't meet the federal guidelines, so it binds our hands on how we can use that money. So we'll discuss that as we move forward. So the motor fuel excise tax. If we increase the motor fuel excise tax by 5 cents a gallon, we could generate $205 million for the Missouri Department of Transportation. If we increase that 10 cents a gallon, that would be twice that, would be $410 million. So if we increase the gas tax, basically is what we're talking about here. Instead of 17 cents a gallon, you'd be paying 27 cents a gallon. We could generate $410 million if we went 10 cents a gallon on that gas tax. And so that would generate that much money for the Department of Revenue. If we just charged a fuel sales tax, in other words, when you bought your gasoline and you charged a sales tax on the total amount of gasoline that you bought, and we made that 5%, we could generate $331 million from ODOT. So if you had a $20 or $30 a bill when you filled your gas tank up, we charge you 5% tax on that. We could generate, based on the amount of volume of gasoline that's being sold in our state, we could generate $331 million just in that alone. What if we just increased the passenger car fees a flat rate by $30? So if we just increased some of those fees a flat rate, and we're talking about increase all the passenger car fees a flat dollar increase of $30, we could generate $111 million for MoDOT. If we just increased our driver's license fees a flat $30, right now I believe you pay $20, you'd pay $50. If that happened, we could generate $37 million just on driver's license fees alone. That's not counting registration, titles, all that. That's just driver's license. So what if we CPI'd or consumer price indexed on motor fuel alone? So if we did that over 3 years and we increased that by cost of living, just on the gas tax, we could generate $46 million in 3 years. If we index the driver's license fees on 6-year driver's license. So what happened back in the late 90s? We didn't change the fee on driver's license. All we did was allow people to get a 3-year from a 3-year license to a 6-year license. We didn't increase the fee. So if we did though and index that, if we indexed the amount of that fee was or is currently, and we charged a $2.25 convenience fee for having a 6-year license over a 3-year license, we could generate $16 million just by indexing the driver's license. So what if we came out and indexed all of our user fees? And we did that at just cost of living. I wanted to let you know what that would do. So, and we're not talking about increasing the fuel tax, even though the fuel tax is a user fee, it would be indexed as well. But if we indexed all the user fees, and the way we calculated that was we went again back 15 years, got an average. Our idea is to go back 6 years and recoup some of that lost money that we haven't indexed since the 60s and since the 80s, and set a new base for 2018. If we just index those at 2.2%, we could generate $197 million from MoDOT. If we then came in and said, okay, let's index those again 3 years later, and we went back, we went back 15 years, got a new average, and just indexed for those 3 years between 2018 and 2021, we could generate an additional $306 million, an additional, 100 and some million, which would give MoDOT $306 million. So if we went another 3 years, in other words, until 2024, and we indexed again, out of all that indexing, we could increase funding to MoDOT $423 million. Now, what does that mean to the consumer? That means instead of paying $11 for, say, for a title registration, at the end of 2024, he'd probably pay about $14 to $15 for that title registration. What would that mean on his driver's license? If he's paying $20 now, at the end of 2024, he would be paying somewhere around $26, something like that. So indexing has the smallest impact on our consumer, but it has the tendency to generate the most amount of money from Missouri Department of Transportation. So this is the most popular one. We've done a survey. This is the most popular. It runs about 72% popularity. So most of the people we've surveyed in our presentations say this is the way I'd like to see us go, and it gives the most money for the least impact. So again, increasing the motor fuel sales tax, it would have to be a ballot issue. It's 1%. If we increase it to 1%, motor vehicle sales tax. So if you bought a vehicle and you paid an additional 1%, we'd have to go in front of the voters on a ballot issue. They'd have to approve it. That alone itself would generate $114 million for MoDOT. The general sales tax. This is what was proposed to the voters on the ballot issue that they defeated. It was at 0.75%. Right here. At 0.75%, it would have generated $611 million. If we put that back on the ballot and did that at 1%, in other words, you would be paying right now you're paying 4.225%. You'd be paying 5.225%. 1% of that 1% would go to MoDOT. That would generate $815 million for MoDOT. That's probably the quickest way for MoDOT to get to where they want. I don't know if it's necessarily the best way. It does have the largest impact on our consumers because it's 1% on everything that you purchase. Now these are low volume roads, and as you can see how they're scattered throughout the state, as I said, that's 11,400 miles of road. They're distributed throughout the counties and throughout the cities, and so we looked at transferring those low volume roads. The reason for that would be take 11,000 miles of roads out of the 34,000 miles of roads that MoDOT has to maintain. That would decrease the amount of roads they had to maintain, put them on the cities and counties, which quite frankly they can do it cheaper, and then that would help MoDOT, or Missouri Department of Transportation, when it came to our interstates, being able to maintain those interstates. The problem with that is that MoDOT says that they only spend $47 million maintaining those roads. That, to me, is not enough money. We'd have, the idea would be to transfer those roads to the cities and counties, give them that $47 million. That's not enough money for them to be able to maintain those roads. You're looking at $400 per mile, and $400 per mile is not going to maintain those roads. So this is the least popular one in our survey. I just want to let you know that the people throughout the state that were traveling are not for this proposal. The toll roads, as we said before, tolling at the entrances. It would take 18 toll gates if we tolled all of our interstates. for your information, there are 177 million vehicles that cross our borders every year on our interstates. So if you charge $3 a vehicle, it's not hard to see where you're going to be close to $500 million just by capturing the money of somebody traveling into our state. So if they travel through the state and don't buy any gasoline and don't buy anything, they're not contributing. So tolling at the entrances will help capture the money for those people who can help contribute to our roads and bridges. They are using them, so that's the idea. It wouldn't affect in-state, so people within the state could travel throughout the state. It wouldn't cost them any more money. It would just be capturing the money from people that are traveling through our state or into our state, and then of course back out on vacations and stuff. They wouldn't pay going out, they would only pay coming in. Now, the open container law, it doesn't amount to a lot of money. It's $21.4 million, but because we don't meet federal guidelines, we can't use that money the way we want to use that. So the only way we can use that is in public safety areas. So even though we have money that already goes to public safety, we thought if we changed the open container law, it would give MoDOT some flexibility to use that $21 million in the Roads and Bridge Fund. So right now they can't use it there. They can only use it in on public safety programs. But it would, if we met the federal guidelines, they could use it other ways. So survey results. This shows you an idea of what we found in our survey as we traveled throughout the state. 44% of the people are interested in raising our gas tax by 5 cents. Now, I don't know what percentage that would be if we raised it by 10 cents, but currently 44% of the people said, I'm okay with raising our gas tax 5 cents. 49%, surprisingly enough, I thought that would be even lower, are interested in the tolling aspect of just tolling our entrances. Again, I want to emphasize, we can't just toll our entrances without us giving the Missouri Department of Transportation authority to go to the federal government to get permission to do that. So, let me make that clear. Till we do that, we couldn't toll. But 49% of the people that we surveyed said, I'm okay with tolling at the entrances of the state. 71% of the people said, let's change the open container law. Even though it's not very much money, let's give MoDOT flexibility for that $21 million. And 73%, believe it or not, are interested in consumer pricing and indexing the user fees. So that's a high number. That's has the least impact on the constituents, generates the most amount of money, gives us the most flexibility as an assembly that we can come back in and say, if cost of living is hurting us, if we stop the indexing and say in 6 years, which we have the flexibility to do, we can stop that indexing. Then if the cost of doing business for MoDOT increases, we can come back in and index again. And so it gives us flexibility to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this on the internet. Along with that, we're going to have a survey. We would appreciate if everyone would complete the survey, give us your ideas, let us know what you want to do. Because legislation, we don't want to create legislation of something you don't want. But we do have a critical situation that's happening where we do need the funding. So how do we get that funding? We want your input. And that's, after you see this presentation, go to the survey, fill out the survey, let us know what you think. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.